Coming up on our newscast tonight, North Korea's top envoy Kim Yong-chul is reportedly headed to Washington to sit down for talks with his American counterpart Mike Pompeo. CNN reports a meeting with the U.S. president seems very likely as the top negotiator is carrying a letter addressed to Trump written by Kim Jong-un. To help achieve innovative growth here in the nation, the government launches a regulatory sandbox. The program grants regulatory waivers during a set period of time to allow industries and technologies to innovate more freely. President Moon Jaein highlights the government's dedication to building a hydrogen economy. He vows to help make the country a leader in the global hydrogen-powered cars and fuel cells market by the year 2030. News Center begins now. It's 8 p.m. here in Korea, live from our studio in Seoul. This is Arirang News Center. Welcome to our program. I'm Daniel Che. North Korea's top nuclear negotiator is on his way to Washington with a letter from the regime's leader. Meanwhile, Pyongyang's vice foreign minister is traveling to Europe. Some analysts believe Choi Sun-hee could meet with her American counterpart Stephen Biegun as well. Woo Jung-hee starts us off with signs of a build-up to another summit between Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump.
The North Korean leader's right-hand man, Kim Yong-chul, is en route to Washington, reportedly carrying Kim Jong-un's letter to U.S. President Donald Trump. According to Seoul-based Yonhap News Agency, the North's envoy has left Beijing after a brief stopover and will land in Washington Thursday evening local time. Kim will stay overnight in Washington, the first such case for a North Korean official since 2000, and meet with U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo on Friday. It's likely he'll meet President Trump too, as according to CNN, he's carrying Kim Jong-un's letter to Trump, which is a reply to Trump's letter that was delivered over the weekend. Meanwhile, North Korea's Vice Foreign Minister Choi Sun-hee is on her way to Sweden. She previously told reporters that she's attending an international conference in the Scandinavian country. But because she is North Korea's U.S. expert and one of the key figures related to the nuclear negotiations, observers say she could be involved in any sort of meeting with the U.S. side in Stockholm. The Washington Post reports if the high-level talks go well between Kim Yong-chul and Mike Pompeo, U.S. officials are expecting Choi Sun-hee and U.S. nuclear envoy Stephen Biegun to meet for the first time in Western Europe shortly. The newspaper adds the time and location of the second North Korea-U.S. summit could be announced as soon as this Friday, and it says the summit's likely to be in Vietnam's Da Nang in March or April. But amid the dialogue momentum, the U.S. is keeping up the pressure on North Korea. In a speech at the State Department, U.S. Vice President Mike Pence said Washington is still waiting for Pyongyang to take concrete steps to dismantle its nuclear weapons. While top nuclear negotiators from North Korea and the U.S. will be sitting down with each other soon, the key for them will be to find a middle ground between each of their demands and go a step closer to reaching a deal, involving the North's tangible denuclearization steps and corresponding U.S. measures. Woo Jung-hee, Arirang News.
Staying with the possible Pyongyang-Washington working-level talks, South Korea's top office expressed optimism the upcoming meeting will turn out to be a productive one. The Cheongwade spokesperson says that the talks between Kim Yong-chul and Mike Pompeo will lay the groundwork for another summit between the leaders of the two sides. On the topic of the North Korean leader's reciprocal visit to Seoul, the spokesperson replied discussions over the next inter-Korean meeting will begin once the Pyongyang-Washington summit takes place. South Korea will deliver 200,000 doses of Tamiflu to Pyongyang early next week. The shipment was agreed on Thursday during an hour-long video conference between Seoul and Washington's Working Group on North Korea. Senior officials here in the nation familiar with the matter say the two Koreas will coordinate the logistics of the antiviral medication delivery. They also discussed developments on the planned video reunions of war-torn families, the joint recovery of war remains, and road inspections up north. The allies are believed to have touched on the South Korean businessman's request to visit the long-shuttered Kaesong Industrial Complex to check their assets as well. But they delved deep into the issue not that much, as the U.S. considered it inappropriate to discuss over video conference. Amid expectations that Pyongyang and Washington could hold high-level talks in the next couple of days, the South Korean and Chinese delegates of the six-party talks met in Seoul today to discuss the latest developments surrounding the peninsula. Special Representative for Korean Peninsula Peace and Security Affairs Lee Do-hoon told his Chinese counterpart Gong Shen-yu that Beijing's constructive role last year helped greatly in bringing the two Koreas to where they are today. He also expressed hope of continued close cooperation with China this year to denuclearize the peninsula and establish peace in the region. Gong agreed their close communication show the diplomatic trust the two countries have for each other and said China will continue working towards the peninsula's peace process. South Korea's Defense Ministry summoned Japanese military attache Tatsuya Watanabe this afternoon to convey strong protest over Japan's actions during the radar spat. Seoul stressed all facts used by its spokesperson were correct regarding a press conference on Monday's working-level discussions held in Singapore between the two countries. This is in response to Tokyo's Defense Ministry summoning South Korean military attaché Wednesday to claim what Seoul said during the press briefing was not correct. The nation's Defense Ministry also protested that Japan had broken the two countries' agreement not to release the content of the discussions before the end of the talks. The Moon Jaein administration continues to work towards achieving its goal of innovative growth. Part of that includes cutting red tapes. Today, the government launched a regulatory sandbox to make it easier for firms to test products without worrying about regulations. Cha Sang-mi gets us better acquainted with this program.
In line with government's continued deregulation efforts, a so-called regulatory sandbox program went live on Thursday. A sandbox is aimed at encouraging new industries and technologies to innovate more freely by offering regulatory waivers for product and service testing during a set time period. The ICT Convergence Act and the Industrial Convergence Promotion Act came into effect on Thursday, and two ordinances regarding financial innovation and regional economy-related regulations are coming into effect in April. Under the changes, companies can look up relevant regulations more easily and can apply for temporary permits for market entry if regulations are too vague or illogical. The Science Ministry said the program will speed up the process of winning regulatory approval, as it will pave the way for firms to launch new services and goods first, and for the government to apply reasonable regulations later. Once approved, the program lasts for 2 years, with a one-time extension allowed. During this time, businesses can test out their technologies and services in the market and redesign their strategies accordingly. The government says around 20 companies have already applied for a review of their products and services. This launch comes after 5 deregulatory laws were submitted to the National Assembly in March of last year, of which 4 were passed this January. Cha Sang-mi, Arirang News.
President Moon Jaein highlighted the importance of ushering in a hydrogen economy era while visiting Ulsan, where many hydrogen-based businesses are gathered. He pledged to help increasing the number of hydrogen-powered vehicles in the nation. Hwang Ho-jun shows us how the South Korean leader is gearing up to realize his vision for innovative growth.
A golden opportunity for South Korea to fundamentally shift away from fossil fuels and build the new growth engines that are the hydrogen economy. According to President Moon Jae-in, this revolutionary change is a must.
수소 경제가 태동하기 시작한 지금 세계 시장 선점이 중요합니다. 수소 경제를 위한 우리 정부의 의지는 확고합니다.
President Moon was speaking on a visit to the southeastern city of Ulsan, home to many hydrogen-based businesses. It was the president's first domestic tour of 2019, aimed at boosting local economies outside of Seoul. While meeting with business leaders, President Moon insisted that South Korea already has a competitive edge. He underscored that the country is the first in the world to mass-produce hydrogen cars. Also, he noted 99% of the parts are made locally, and Korea holds about 50% of the world's hydrogen car market.
2030년 수소차와 연료전지에서 모두 세계 시장 점유율 1위를 하는 것이 우리의 목표입니다.
To realize this goal, President Moon Jaein first pledged to increase the number of hydrogen-powered vehicles in the country up to 4,000 this year and to 1.8 million by 2030. If that target is reached, President Moon said it would generate over $22 billion in wealth, create 200,000 new jobs, and even reduce fine dust pollution by about 10% from current levels. Hydrogen cars actually help clean up fine dust when in motion, since their exhaust is only water vapor. President Moon also pledged to expand government subsidies for hydrogen taxis and trucks, which originally applied only to cars and buses. He will also seek to increase the number of hydrogen-powered buses to 2,000 and the number of charging stations to 310 by 2022, calling for a swift regulatory reform to make it happen. Before returning to Seoul, President Moon visited the nation's biggest hydrogen gas plant and gave some words of encouragement to the workers there. Hwang Ho-jun, Arirang News.
The government will expand subsidies to consumers who buy hydrogen or electric cars. According to the Environment Ministry, that means nearly 60,000 vehicles will be eligible, an increase of 25,000 from a year ago. The subsidies are worth about $30,000 depending on the car. It'll also build about 1,000 more high-speed charging stations. The subsidies, however, will not apply to cars that were already subsidized when purchased or those that are for research purposes. The ministry expects these eco-friendly cars will help improve the nation's air quality. Seoul's finance chief met with organizations representing small businesses to discuss ways to improve conditions for them. Hong Nam-gi vowed to stay in close touch with these groups and listen to their ideas when it comes to the minimum wage, which has been raised by double digits for 2 years in a row now. These organizations have been calling for wages to be raised more slowly because of the difficulties higher wages have posed to small business owners. The minister also promised to support the self-employed. Although the specifics have not been announced yet, he said the government will submit a bill this year to Parliament to support these two groups. Last year, South Korea's exports of information and communication technology products reached new highs. The record figure is made possible mainly thanks to strong outbound shipments of semiconductors. Kim Hye-sung breaks down the digits for us.
Korea's exports of information and communication technology products hit an all-time high in 2018. The Trade Ministry says a total of $220.4 billion worth of ICT products were shipped overseas, up more than 11% on year. Semiconductors were the top item. Exports soared to $128 billion last year, up more than 28% from 2017. Computers and related devices were up 17%, recording over $11 billion of exports. 2018 marked the first time Korea semiconductors became the first single goods category to top $100 billion in exports, but data shows a slowdown in semiconductor export growth. In the first half of 2018, chip exports grew by 42% on year, while in the second half, they only grew by about 18%. In December, chip exports actually dropped 10% on year to $16 billion on falling demand and lower prices.
Last year, semiconductors accounted for about half of all ICT exports, recouping losses from sluggish mobile and display exports. Chip exports are likely to fall in the first half of this year on slowing global demand. But with 5G wireless services really kicking in, driving chip demand for data servers, chip prices, and exports are expected to go up in the second half of this year.
In 2018 as a whole, ICT exports to China, South Korea's #1 trading partner, jumped 14% to $119 billion. Exports to Vietnam gained 8% to $28 billion, and ICT shipments to the United States climbed 13% to around $21 billion. Imports reached a little over $107 billion last year, giving Korea an information and technology trade surplus of $113.3 billion, also the highest on record so far. Kim Hye-sung, Arirang News.
The nation's exports of fresh fruits and vegetables increased last year by over 16% to reach $1.3 billion. According to the Agriculture Ministry, these items led an increase in food exports overall, which rose for a third consecutive year to nearly $7 billion. The biggest increase in sales was in pears, which jumped more than 21% to $80 million. They were especially popular in Vietnam and the U.S. Other fruits such as grapes and strawberries saw higher demand too. Among processed foods, sales of ramen or instant noodles spiked to $400 million for the first time since being sold overseas. EU member states greenlit the European Commission's plan to impose definitive safeguard measures on steel imports. It's a decision that's expected to have a significant impact on South Korea. Kim Jaein explains further.
The latest safeguard measures on imported steel products released by the European Commission are a heavy blow to major steel exporting countries like South Korea. The EU is the fourth largest importer of South Korean steel, with over 3.3 million tons of steel exported to the region in 2017, worth some $2.9 billion.
On top of US tariff measures on imported steel, the EU measures are expected to directly hit Korean steel exporters, hurting production as well as the volume of steel exports. It's going to be tough for the Korean government to try and get an exemption from EU safeguards, since the measures usually cannot exempt certain countries.
The European Commission has informed the World Trade Organization of its decision to impose a 25% tariff on 26 steel products, including hot-rolled and cold-rolled steel sheets, imported into the EU above a certain level. The measures will come into force early next month and run until July 2021. The European Commission says steel imports below 105% of the volumes recorded over the 2015 and 2017 period will be exempt from tariffs through 2021. But steel imports exceeding 105% will be slapped with a 25% duty. The tariff decision follows an investigation last July after the Trump administration imposed tariffs on imported steel and aluminum products for national security reasons. Last week, Seoul raised opposition to the EU's plan, signaling it would take retaliatory measures if the EU insisted on the safeguard measures. Kim Jaein, Arirang News.
Moving on to other stories now, some say the recent series of testimonies about violence and sexual assault in the South Korean sports industry paints a shameful portrait of the country's pursuit of becoming one of the elite sporting powerhouses in the world. Won Jung-hwan sheds light on the deep-rooted factors that leads young athletes to tolerate such violence in the sporting arena.
The Me Too movement that has swept through Korea's sport community may be just the tip of the iceberg. According to data released by the Korean Sport and Olympic Committee last week, 860 coaches and athletes faced disciplinary measures such as suspensions over reports of irregularities and abuse in the last 5 years. But 300 of them were either reinstated or hired elsewhere after their suspension expired, and in 24 other cases, that happened even before their punishment ended. The evidence shows that most names cannot but suffer violence and abuse in silence due to fear of retaliation. It has become practically a given that offenders in elite groups in the sports industry are able to return to the field, exposing young athletes and victims to further abuse by the same perpetrators. Coaches in particular are able to scout and foster young talents in the form of apprenticeships. As such, young athletes who fall victim to abuse often choose to stay silent in fear of ruining their careers. Scores and rankings suddenly become more important than integrity or personal principles. And this deeply rooted system has led to the notion that sexual violence is a given in the sports arena. But experts say any movement targeting wrongdoers should not arbitrarily generalize, as it could also affect innocent people and cause more harm than good.
I see this as individual acts and not problems of the system. There are many athletes and related officials out there who work really hard to achieve their dreams, so we should not really focus on the cause and effect relationship regarding recent incidents, but rather focus on ways to properly deal with guilty offenders, no matter how outstanding or important they are.
Although there is increasing public anger and disappointment over the recent abuse reports, many are hoping that there can finally be a much-needed change in the industry. Won Jung-hwan, Arirang News.
It is well known that South Koreans work more and sleep less than their international counterparts. Against this backdrop, people here in the nation have been looking for ways to catch us news in the least amount of time. Our Seo Eun-kyung has the full story.
On a workday during lunch hour, Mr. Cha visited a cafe near his company. But this is not an ordinary cafe. Located in the heart of Yeouido, Seoul's major finance district, this cafe offers visitors the opportunity to get a shut-eye. With about $6 to $12 an hour, people can catch a snooze with either a recliner or a massage chair or watch TV alone.
I come here to take a quick nap when I work overtime at night. I feel more refreshed from resting in a private space than from putting my head down on the office desk and sleeping.
Office workers in their 20s and 30s are my major customers.
The cafe registered more than 5,000 visitors last month alone, a five-fold increase from a year earlier.
Lack of sleep and stressful schedules have prompted more Koreans, especially young people, to search out ways to take a power nap. They find a short block of time in the day to get some much-needed shut-eye.
For those who wish to explore an unusual but leisurely powerful form of napping, the hyperbaric oxygen chamber has been a popular choice. The chamber offers hyperconcentrations of oxygen which boost concentration and reduce fatigue. This cafe welcomed 300 visitors when it opened in May 2017, but by December last year, the number skyrocketed to 1,000 a month. Amid the growing popularity of powered naps, a new word has been coined, sleeponomics, meaning that people pay money for sleeping.
The market size of the sleeponomics in Korea has jumped to over $4 billion from $1.7 billion in 2016.
The expert added that as more and more people learn about the health benefits of short naps, the market is expected to continue growing and diversifying. Seong-kyung, Arirang News.
Turning to some football action now, Team South Korea continue their winning ways in the Asian Cup. The Taeguk Warriors clinch knockout stage berth with a perfect 3-for-3 record after dealing China a humbling defeat. Lee Seung-jae has the highlights from their final Group C match.
South Korea's superstar striker Son Heung-min is back with the national team, and he couldn't have arrived in Abu Dhabi sooner, as the Taeguk Warriors went into their final Group C match on Wednesday night against China. With the South Korean forward line having struggled against far inferior opponents in the two previous group games, Son put fire into the offense and re-energized the whole squad. The Tottenham Hotspur forward made an immediate impact as well. He blasted through the Chinese defense in the 14th minute, only to be brought down by one of China's defenders. Son's striking partner Hwang Hee-jo converted the spot kick for a 1-0 lead. It stayed that way until the 51st minute, when Son's corner found the head of Kim Min-jae, who made it 2-0, and that's how the match ended. The late addition of Son comes as Tottenham Hotspur held him out of the first two group matches in exchange of making him available for last year's Asian Games. The South Korean star comes into the Asian Cup in fine form, having been nominated for English Premier League's Player of the Month in December, netting 6 times last month and setting up 3 goals for his teammates. South Korea's 3 wins on the bounce means they finish top of Group C and opens up a potentially easier route to the final. They will play their round of 16 match next Wednesday night, but their opponents have yet to be decided. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Time to turn to Michelle back at the Weather Center for the updates you need. Michelle, is the weather tomorrow going to be just as nice as today?
Well, Daniel, tomorrow Korea and its surrounding countries will be under clear skies with comfortable readings. In fact, Seoul will rise 3 degrees higher than the seasonal average daily highs. However, the capital areas and the western provinces will be under high concentrations of fine dust tomorrow. Seoul residents will be needing protective masks the whole day, while those in the southern regions will see dust levels fluctuate throughout the day. Now, although the daytime highs are mild, the morning lows are expected to be colder than today. Seoul begins at -5 degrees Celsius, Chuncheon at -11 degrees, while Busan and Jeju gets a warmer start. And into the day, Seoul will reach up to 5 degrees, while Busan and Jeju jumps into the low teens. Now, the weekend forecast is looking mild and sunny as well, except over in southern coastal regions and also Jeju Island, where snow, rain, or even both will fall. Now, also keep in mind weather conditions are very dry these days, especially for the eastern coastal regions, where a dry weather advisory has been issued. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
That's all we could pack into tonight's edition of Arirang News Center. Wherever you may be tuning in from, thanks for staying with us.